This should be played at high volume.
Welcome to High Volume. I appreciate you guys being here today because we're talking about greatness. That's what we like to do week in and week out. And we've got somebody here today that exemplifies some greatness, a foundational member of this franchise when it talks about the success that they've had, Super Bowl winning champion, three-time Pro Bowler. I mean, the list goes on, and we'll cover a lot of that. Welcome into the show, the great Tarik Glenn.
Thank you, Jeffrey Gorman. I appreciate you having me.
Well, I love having you. I love to talk this. We've talked a few times through the years, but I want to dive in kind of deep to your career. First question, do your kids know how great of a player that you were in the NFL?
You know, I used to always say, you know, that there's a little TikTok reel that keeps circulating around me, Jeff Saturday, and Peyton's altercation. It's in the early 2000s, and that was the only piece of evidence, you know, social media evidence that
right.
really justified and said that I played. But, you know, the fact that, you know, I got inducted into the Ring of Honor gave, you know, all of my family an opportunity to come to Indianapolis and really receive, you know, just the full experience of what it meant to be a Colt, and to be able to have that moment for myself, but more importantly, my family, was super fulfilling, and it gave them a taste of what I experienced when I was in Indianapolis.
Well, I'll tell you what, you've exemplified a great career, and obviously you're loved in the community when you played here. After you retired, I want to start up in Berkeley. I want to start at UCal with your career. And you were a two-way player in high school, and you were being recruited from everywhere across the state of California especially, and you decided to go to Cal and play football up there. Were you undecided when you went in there, were going to stay on the offensive or defensive side of the ball, or did they recruit you specifically to stay on the O-line?
Yeah, they recruited me. Well, they told me that I was going to play D-line, but I think the story is that there's a ton of O-linemen that they recruited that they started out on D-line, and then after a year, they just switched over. And so myself, Todd Stussy, Jeremy Newberry, you know, a lot of great NFL players, you know, came to Cal, started off at D-lineman, and then switched over to offensive line.
That's great. Obviously, we're glad you stuck with that. When did you know, hey, I'm probably going to get paid to play this game in the next couple of years? Sophomore, junior year, you were a 4-year starter up there. So when did you know?
Yeah. My junior year, you know, when I switched over to the O-line, we had 2 first-round draft picks, or, you know, soon-to-be first-round draft picks, in Reagan Upshaw and Dwayne Clemens. And, you know, I went against them in practice every day. And I felt, you know, that I was holding my own, competing. I was able to, you know, really pass protect against some of the best in the nation. They both were All-Americans after their junior year. And so after, you know, that experience, I was able to really gain the confidence necessary to just kind of see myself in the NFL.
Well, you were the 19th overall pick. Help me out on this one, because I'm interviewing you here. I'm drawing a blank. Was it Bill Tobin that picked you, or was it Bill Polian that picked you? Who was the GM when you were coming out of Cal?
Yeah, names from a long time ago. So Bill Tobin, he was famous for putting together that '85 Bears team. He was the GM at the time, and he's the one that picked me in '97. Polian came in '98. Yeah. And, you know, I think, the fact that Bill Tobin was here, you know, he picked me at 19. We had some holdout issues initially, put me at right guard, and then Polian came in, brought Howard Mudd, and the rest was history.
Yeah, it is. So stay there for me. That first year, you're known as that left tackle, that outside guy that's not going to touch the quarterback. But you played guard here your first year coming out of Cal. Was that switch big for you, or was it pretty comfortable? Because obviously, when you made the switch, you got a new quarterback behind you named Peyton Manning.
Well, yeah. So, like, when I played guard, Jim Harbaugh was my quarterback,
right?
And there wasn't a whole lot of bragging, you know, during that season. I mean, I think we gave up like 56 sacks, and it was a horrible situation. But I think it was a blessing in disguise, because myself and Adam Meadows both were rookie draft picks, got thrown in the fire. Had an opportunity to compete and get an idea of what the NFL was like, and then I think when we got a new coaching staff, it really like solidified putting us in positions to set us up for success. And then we drafted Peyton Manning. That can't hurt it either, right?
Right.
Bringing in, just a generational quarterback, it really helped out the situation. But yeah, that first year, it was my eyes wide open. I mean, there was a lot of bright spots, though. I mean, we had Marvin Harrison.
Sure.
He was a draft pick the year before me.
Marshall Falk, was
Marshall
it?
Falk
Yeah.
was the running back, and man, it was easy to block for a guy who just kind of set you up. Always put me in the perfect position, to block. And so, yeah, definitely had some bright spots, but it was a tough year. We went 3-13.
How about you personally, though? Here you're coming out of, you're coming out of Oakland, you're coming out of Cal, you're 19th overall pick. You spent 2 years playing on the offensive side of the ball. I mean, that's tough to throw a young man into a situation. Not only that, had you even been to Indianapolis or know about the Midwest before that, Tarik, about, hey, this is a place where I'm going to make my home?
Yeah, I mean, the only time I've been to Indianapolis was the combine. And so I always tell the story. I was on the bus, with, just a bunch of the guys that were flying in from the combine. And so we were on the bus driving from the airport to, the RCA Dome at the time, and basically seeing all the snow on the ground and that track on, Highway 65 on the way to the RCA Dome. In my mind, I'm thinking, man, I hope I don't get drafted to this place. So, the day of, getting picked in the first round, you're just excited.
Yeah.
At that point, you don't care about, anything other than having an opportunity to showcase your skills and live out your dreams.
That's Tarik Glenn, and one of the foundational members of, responsible, as some have said, to make this from a basketball state into a football state. And you were imperative on that thing, Tarik, because you were here in the years of greatness leading the way. When you talk about the difference between Jim Mora as a head coach and Tony Dungy, I mean, you went right into those two. What was the biggest difference between those two head coaches in your eyes?
Well, I mean, I think when Jim Mora came, it was at a perfect time because the locker room was just a complete mess. I mean, we just didn't have any culture. We needed a coach that came in that really, taught us how work ethic and really taught us, how to be tough, how to play the game, to be respected in the NFL. And so there was elements of just, Jim Mora's style that I thought that was appropriate for, just the culture that he was coming into. But then I feel like what took us over the top was, a guy like Dungy who had a little bit more of an innovation to his coaching style. He really learned how to meet the players where they're at, was really good on just like making sure that there was like work-life balance, that guys were more than just what they put on the football field. What we did off the field mattered just as much. And then, just really learning how to play winning football. I think that we won with Jim Mora, but I just think that the experience along the way wasn't as enjoyable. And I just think Dungy did a really good job of creating moments where we just really enjoyed each other's company, and the journey was enjoyable.
And absolutely, you're surrounded by greatness there with the arrival of Peyton Manning, the arrival of Edgerrin James, Reggie Wayne as well. We can throw Marvin Harrison into that, Dallas Clark. But you were that foundational guy. That's what I'm saying. I think that many people overlook how important you were to the core of that because, it takes a locker room that has to be non-divided. You've got to be all in. And obviously, Peyton set the way for that. You led by example, though, Tarik. That's what I'm getting at, is I watched it. I covered you for years. You weren't a big talker. When we wanted to talk to you, you would talk. But you were a leader by example, much like that Tony Dungy had that same way. Didn't say a lot, but if you watch what they do, you're going to be in a good position.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, whenever you look back at, really good football teams, it requires to have just a core group of guys that just embody like the culture that you want to create, the winning culture that you want to have on a football team. And I think that being a part of that I was honored to be able to be a part of that,
Yeah.
and I think my role, the fact that I had an opportunity, me and Peyton in particular had an opportunity, and Marvin, to kind of see what bad culture looked like.
Yeah.
We really had an opportunity as a young core to like really build, something special, something different, something that we would have appreciated to have when we came into, to a football team. And I think that that's like really what we try to create. I mean, I'll never forget, me and Adam Meadows, we were rookies, the same year, and we used to always say, man, if we're ever veterans in the room, we would do it different.
Mm.
And so when we brought in guys like Jeff Saturday, Ryan Dean, it was really about, making them feel a part of something special. It wasn't about the hazing,
Yeah. Right.
just the old school way of doing things. And so, yeah, it was definitely, great to be a part of building something. Obviously, when you're doing it, you don't know how special it's going to be. But, looking back at it, just I feel a lot of gratitude being able to be a part of something
And you
like
knew
that.
greatness was around you, Tarik. I mean, like I said, you knew with these players there, with Bill Polian put in position, Tony Dungy over from Tampa. You knew what you guys had. I just want to touch on that Tampa Bay Monday night win. Tony Dungy's birthday, he goes back
Yeah.
in there. I mean, the back and forth of that game. I always talk to players that played in that game. I was exhausted sitting up in the upper deck up there. Just if you could, just glance over that game in the way that it showed the greatness of the Colts, mainly the great Peyton Manning.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you this much. That game obviously showed the grit and the determination, and it basically was the catalyst that kind of took us in a new direction.
Yeah.
But I would have to say, personally, that was probably like one of the games that I didn't like particularly. I mean, that was the game I got hurt in, and it's like it ended my streak. I had started like I think over 100 games in a row, and I got hurt that game just on the fluke. Somebody fell into my knee, and
Ah,
then I missed like 6 games after that. But to play in a game like that, I think was just very climatic. Obviously, because Dungy came from Tampa, and yeah, everybody I think in the league was thinking like they're crazy, to get rid of such a talent,
yeah.
and to be able to, see us be able to pull a game out for him on his birthday, back at Tampa at a
Yeah.
place that shouldn't have got rid of him, yeah, and the way that it happened, it was crazy. I mean, I don't know, it was like what 1:30 in the morning when the
Yeah.
game was over.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was a late one. Man, that's incredible. I like bringing back those old memories with you. There's a couple more in there I want to talk to you about, like when you saw Peyton, when you guys went in the following year after that, 2 years after that, you guys are humming like this. You're getting better with Howard Mudd, which is a name that I don't bring up a lot to people, but Howard Mudd, and I hope you can explain to the people that are listening, like the importance of it. Dungy's important, Peyton's important, Tarik Glenn's important, but the responsibility of that man Howard Mudd to make you guys better and to get that trust of those stars that were all around you making plays on the outside.
Two coaches, for at least for me
Mm,
personally, that had probably the most impact on my career was Howard Mudd and Tom Moore. Those two individuals, their philosophy, I drunk the Kool-Aid,
mm-hmm.
and I think our team did, from when they got there in '98, and on the Jim Mora staff, and then obviously Tony kept them on. They really built like a philosophy around playing the best players and doing what we do the best, not necessarily having a system to force people to play within. And I just thought that, that always kind of really resonated with me. And I think it resonated with a lot of the guys that we brought in. Like you have a guy like Edrin James, and
Yeah.
he's a special talent, but and he could run any run, but he ran, the slant and the zone play the best. But that was one of his better plays. And so, Tom Moore, his philosophy was like, hey, why, have third go into a game of 30 runs and we run these 5 runs the best. I mean, he was kind of like the pioneer of analytics before
Yeah.
analytics, and he was
Well
just like,
said.
hey, we're gonna run these 5 runs because we run them the best, and we won't make you stop it. And so and then Howard Mudd, his philosophy was basically like, the quarterback is going to thrive when he's most comfortable. And so everything from day one when he arrived was like, we need to make him feel comfortable. So we're going to focus on protection, whether it's like our pass block techniques to us understanding the pass protection. We walk through every scenario, like literally every single practice, there was some element of how we're going to protect 18, how we're going to make him feel comfortable. And I think that also, was a great, just philosophy for a young quarterback because, a lot of time you see, I'm a fan of the game. You watch these young guys come in and there's just obviously an expectation for these guys to step up and produce. And there's not a lot of focus around, what is the team doing to put that player in the best position to thrive. And I think that they did that for Peyton. They did that for all of us. And so I just feel as if it was great. It was a great, obviously an offensive philosophy, Howard Mudd and Tom Moore tandem that they put together to really like evaluate the talent that they had, make sure that they put us all in the best position to be our best selves, and then gave us the confidence to feel as if like, hey, Tom Moore used to always tell me like, hey, you got Bruce Smith this week. I'm not coming to help you. You can do it. Howard Mudd, when I had a bad play, he was always about, hey, it's all about how you respond, not necessarily about if you're perfect, and so it was, but they both coached really, really hard. If anybody was around practices, they know that, me and Howard, bumped heads quite a bit,
Yeah.
but, our love-hate relationship, like was, one in which I would never take away. He's probably one of the most important people in my life. I really felt like he really taught me how to, really be a, really good professional. And to be able to show up every week, being able to take constructive criticism, not lose my self-control, stay composed, and really, put out the best product.
And you did, and he did just that. Let's fast forward to the Super Bowl. There's a story out there that Saturday was talking to me about, and I think you were a part of it. Before that game, you guys were set up to zone block against those Bears, and like the night before the game, something clicked in your players, not your coach's eyes, but you players that said, we can take these guys man up one-on-one. Let's get rid of this. Let's get rid of this zone. Can you walk me through that? Because it was monumental, and obviously you're a Super Bowl champion afterwards.
That would probably be the simplest way to describe it. But I just think that, we were like a play action team where we were trying to obviously we would zone block, and then out the zone we would play action, and it would suck the safeties in and get the receivers open down the field. And so, that was our secret sauce. But the Bears used to like Lance Briggs and Urlacher. They would get them in that A gap and they would show them. And so, the strategy going into the game was that, hey, let's just initially was like, let's play action them. But the reality it's like, what's the point of play action if they're already in the A gap? Let's just, abandon the play action, block them straight up.
Wow.
And then, let it all kind of play out. And I just think that it's those type of and I think that that's what allowed us to grow and step to the next level. It obviously won us a Super Bowl, but I think, even though I didn't play on the team moving forward, from that point forward, I just think that we had finally graduated from a coach-led team to, a team that had just like a group of leaders on the team that were players that could kind of experience things on the field. And if the game plan needed to be adjusted, coaches were open and willing to make those adjustments. And so, we had to fight for it that day because like the year before, Pittsburgh had did something very similar and we didn't make adjustments based on that. And so we were like, no, let's not fall into that trap again. because teams are game planning against us, trying to, suck us into doing one thing. And I felt like that was the first game we were able to, from a game plan perspective, make an adjustment last minute to put us in a position to be successful.
Absolutely. And like we said, a Super Bowl champion. I love stories like that. Did you know walking off that field that you were done playing professional football?
I didn't, I really didn't. I mean, obviously, on a mountaintop at that point,
Mm-hmm. Walking off
when
a
I think
winner.
back, yeah, when I think back of that moment, I never would have imagined that, we, at least myself, being a part of a Super Bowl team. I mean, I'll never forget being in Peyton's room with Saturday and a couple other guys, and we were watching, like, like every time before the Super Bowl, they'll play, like, on ESPN, they'll show all the past Super Bowl teams,
Yeah.
and you grow up and you watch like the Cowboys or the Niners or, Pittsburgh Steelers, all these like famous dynasties, right? And then, at the end of it, they're like, who's the next dynasty, right? And you never can, put your team or yourself in that position, and to know that, you had an opportunity to do that. And then us actually accomplishing that was just surreal. So, yeah, man, at the moment I did not know, but yeah, that ended up being my last game.
Absolutely. And you went out in style, a Super Bowl champion. I love the fact that I want to let people know you got your degree at Purdue University.
I did.
I mean, that's like the accomplishments that you've done in your professional career. And then this, at that point of your life, you know what I'm saying? You retired as a professional and a great player and got some money in the bank and a great family. Why go back for your master's?
Well, I mean, two things. One, I mean, I want, my kids to, thrive for,
Mm-hmm.
being their best selves, and I think that one of the ways that you can do that is by just being a lifelong learner. And, the NFL does a great job of providing that resource for former players. We get to go and continued education for free, and I had started it and wanted to finish it, and I wanted my kids to know that, yeah, anything is possible. So, like, I was the only person between my wife and I who hadn't had a second degree, so I wanted to get it. I think the second reason is that I was applying for a job that I needed a second degree as well. And so it was just like, I want to be able to continue to, like, accomplish my goals. Sometimes goals require you to, take steps in order to accomplish that goal. And one of the steps was to get a second degree. And so I felt that that would be the great, the next best step in goal to objective to accomplish in order to get that. And so that's why I did it.
You're a leader. You've always been that alpha leader, and for as long as I've known of you, we can't stop this interview without talking about what you talked about earlier, the TikTok thing, the craze that went all over. St. Louis Rams in town Monday night. The offensive line is wondering why we're not running the football, and the quarterback saying just block, and then you see number 78 come out. Tarik Glenn, who grabs by the shoulder the great Peyton Manning, the sheriff at that time, and you weren't having it, Tarik, and you said, go sit down. Go sit down. Like, the reason I'm bringing that up is because that's Peyton Manning to us fans and everything like that. But you're his left tackle, so I know you have a relationship with him where you can put him in his place. But it was great watching that, and you had to get the waters calm. This game was close at the time.
I mean, we were teammates, so I feel like the one thing about teammates is that, we all have, like, we're all in a position where, we know that we compete with each other every single day, whether it's in practice, whether it's in games, and we know what it takes in order for us to be successful. When you see two teammates, competing at a high level,
Yes.
yeah, of course, Jeff is like, hey, man, let's run the ball. And Peyton is like, no, let me continue to call the plays like I've been calling the plays. And so I don't think one person was right or one person was in a better situation than the other. But I think the bigger point of the matter is just making sure that we're just respecting one another, right? And and I think that that was, in the situation where we've always, like, learned how to establish, like, hey, we'll take care of ourselves. You take care of yourself. Like we'll get it together. It's all good to exchange words, but for them to be on the sidelines, like beefing with each other, man, it wasn't necessary. And so it's like I think it kind of got embellished a little bit,
Yeah.
as if I was like jumping in Peyton's grill, defending, Jeff Saturday, but it was really about. Hey man, let's go fight the Rams, not each other. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
right.
And also too, just we were young leaders. You know what I'm saying? Like, Peyton at that time wasn't like we know Peyton right now is like, he's like generational guy. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? But like, in year 5, year 6, year 7, like he was emerging into becoming who he was. You know what I'm saying? And so I feel like, that Peyton Manning, required all of us, to really come alongside of him and help, really like, get us focused on what we were trying to get done. By the time like the Dallas Clarks got there and Anthony Gonzalez's
Yeah.
and Austin Collie, he was different. He was like already, there, but during that time, it was like really like we were like a collective unit, like really trying to figure out how to win. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's also just kind of what you see in clips like that as well, is just that, we were all just really trying to support each other, and trying to figure out ways that we can, just like, keep our head on straight, try to win games, not, don't not let the pressure cause us to be internally, destructive, but, to take out all that energy and frustration on the opponent.
Well, I'll tell you what, you showed your greatness. One thing I loved about you is you are who you are. You know what you get in Tarik Glenn. If I see you out in public, I get a big old bear hug and how's everything going? And I just didn't understand how you did that, because you're this gentle, kind, beautiful man and friendly, and then you go to a bar fight for 60 minutes every Sunday against the greats in the game. And I'm just another tip of the hat to you guys, because it's a bunch of rare men that can do what you guys did. And walking off the field as a Super Bowl champion and waving goodbye to the game like you did, Tarik, you went out on top, man. And I just want to, again, much respect, and I'm glad we had a chance to catch up today and keep people caught up about your greatness. And while we're at it, how's things up at Berkeley right now for you and your family?
Yeah, man, things are great. My wife and I are empty nesters now. Like we send our youngest to college at the beginning, last fall. And so now, yeah, we're like trying to figure out life,
Right.
not having kids in the house, working at UC Berkeley still.
Yes.
College football is in the frenzy, you know what I'm saying? Just with the NIL, the
Sure it
transfer
is.
portal.
Well, you do a great job, and please give our best to Maya and your family as well. I thank you so much for sitting down. And like I said, you're really a great guy to watch. I came into this league, you had already had a couple seasons under your belt, and then just being able to watch you and befriend you and your family, man, I'm telling you, I'm a lucky man. And Colts fans are lucky that they have you as a foundational piece, because this place will always be known as greatness. Lucas Oil Stadium and Tarik Glenn, your name will never not be up in the rafters at Lucas Oil Stadium. I'm saying wherever they play their games 100 years from now, you will still be up there. So again, tip of the cap and much respect, sir.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Appreciate you, brother.
The great Tarik Glenn right there. Glad you guys watched High Volume. I appreciate you watching on YouTube. Don't forget to like and give us 5 stars and subscribe and everything else that you do. We're trying to bring you some Colts greatness week in and week out, and we need your help. You can listen on Colts Audio Network as well as Colts.com. A big thanks to Tarik Glenn. We will talk to you next week.
This should be played at high volume.